said to them, if anybody comes to the side door, no matter who it is, police, fire, no matter who it is, you call the police and you summon the police to the door. Don't let anybody in. And they said to him, step away from the desk. Come out here from behind that desk and let's get a good look at you. Now, Rick has a decision to make, because Rick in front of him has the only alarm, it's an emergency alarm, that is inside the museum that he can press that can tell the outside world there's an emergency going on at the museum. Summon police now.
Hey, this is Matt Cox, and I am with Stephen Kurkjian, and he is a retired reporter with the Boston Globe. Pretty sure that's right. Boston Globe, correct?
Exactly.
Yes. Wrote a great book on the Gardner Museum heist, and he's here to explain the whole thing to me. It's going to be great.
So Matt is doing these podcasts, and as I understand, he has concentrated in the criminal world. This too is a case out of the criminal world, but it's something different. It's not money, it's not jewelry, it's art of the ages, and it stems from a theft that took place March 18th, 1990. That is now 32 years ago, and it has remained a case that I've focused on. I began focusing on the mid-90s when I returned to the Globe from my prior assignment, which was in Washington. But I had been an investigative reporter all my life, and had, in fact, had been a founding member of the Globe Spotlight team, which, if you haven't seen the movie Spotlight, you get a sense of what it does. That team started in the early 70s and broke some of the biggest stories in Boston, including the criminal alliance that Whitey Bulger, who is the most notorious criminal in Boston history, in the secret alliance he had with the FBI. That was a story that was broken by the Globe Spotlight team in the late 80s. I wasn't a member of the team then, but when I came back from Washington, I joined the team in 2002, and right after it had broken what I consider the greatest, most important journalism story, at least in Boston history, and that is the clergy abuse, what's known as clergy abuse scandal, that the Boston Archdiocese was covering up, tolerating, probably encouraging abuse of children by priests within the Archdiocese, knowing about it, tolerating it, and covering up on it. That story, too, was broken by the Globe Spotlight team in 2002. So I thought, since the Globe Spotlight team stands for something beyond breaking headlines, but something that's important about Boston, I would do a book on the Gardner Museum, because I consider it to have an important element to it about Boston. The museum was opened in 1903 by Isabella Stewart Gardner, and in it she had a collection of artwork of the ages. At the time it opened in 1903, it was considered the largest private collection of art in America. And she had collected that art with her husband, who was one of Boston's most well-to-do entrepreneurs, from 1860 to 1880 when he passed away, and she decided that she would put the art in the museum, because what she had found in her travels with her husband, that art was defined a civilization. And while the United States, America, was becoming a world power in the late 1800s, it lacked what she saw was made these civilizations that lasted forever, going back to the dynasties of China, and that was the art. and she wanted to encourage an appreciation and inspire experimentation in art here in America. So she built this museum, one of the nicer sections of Boston, close to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, and 4 stories of building, and the 4th floor was an administrative offices, but the other 3 floors were filled with galleries, and as I say, it was the richest collection of private collection of art in America. And when it opened in 1903, she had 2 mandates. One is that people could go there for free. That had to change over the years. It's now a tidy sum, but it is still free of charge for students. And the second was that Boston school students, the little ragamuffins, the 8th graders, should each class would go through the museum and look at the museum and see the art and get up close to the art. And what she wanted to do was inspire Bostonians, if not Americans, to appreciate and experiment with art. And it worked. I know that personally it worked because my father, he was a commercial artist, came to America as a refugee from a survivor of the Armenian genocide. And when he got into art school, he would go over to the museum every day after school and study the masters of the ages, Rembrandt, Vermeer. But when Mrs. Gardner died in mid-20s, her will had one provision in it that I think sowed the seeds for the theft that was to come. And that was that nothing could change in the galleries. The museum had to stay as it was at the time of her death. And so the museum became sort of a timepiece. The trustees who took over running it didn't have really a purpose except to open the doors. They didn't have a purpose to raise money because they didn't have to raise money because all the collection was complete. But in not collecting and not going to the endowment and raising money from their well-to-do sponsors, the museum itself began to fray. It was paying their guards just about minimum wage, which was more than $3 or $4 an hour, and the museum began to fray. So by the mid '80s, the collection there was no central air conditioning, and the security director whom they hired, the first security director they hired in the early '80s, told me that he would come in the mornings and the paintings themselves, the canvases were filled with moisture. Now that was hurting the paintings. So he went to the trustees and he said, "You have to put in a central air conditioning." They did, $500,000. He went back to them the next year and said, "You've got to put in a fire alarm system." They said, "We don't have money. We spent all our money last year on a central air." Well, he raised $50,000 to get a fire alarm system in. But they didn't get around to improving the quality or the professionalism of the guards. They continued to be retirees or kids who came in and were working at barely over the minimum wage. And that was certainly true of the 2 men who were on duty that night of March 18th, 1990. One of the 2 men had never worked a shift, maybe had worked a shift once before. He was called in that night because the regular fella, the old timer who had worked a shift, had called in sick. So the second man who was on duty as ever, he was Rick. He too had never had much experience in protecting art and in security. He had a love of rock and roll, and he and a group of friends he roomed with in Brighton area of Boston, they had started a band. and they were doing okay. They were having a few rages at their basement of their house, and they would invite in the college kids who lived in the neighborhood, and they would raise enough for the rent, or they would play at a couple of the seedier bars in the neighborhood, and they were doing okay. And he loved the work as a at the museum, as he told me, because it allowed him to continue what he really wanted to do, which was start a rock and roll band, and quit doing that work at midnight and rush over to the museum and take on his job of the night, which was his night security job. And the museum was closed. He said it was a perfect job for him. He often was stoned or drunk, he told me, when he showed up at night, but it didn't matter because he was nothing ever happened. No one ever came in. No one ever knocked at the door. They did the rounds. And there wasn't a little bit of security equipment at the museum, but there was only one alarm bell to the outside world if something was going on. But he had never used it because nothing had ever happened. Well, something happened on the night of March 18th, 1990. You have to look up in your calendar if you're not in Boston. You don't have to tell a Bostonian what March 17th is. It's St. Patrick's Day, and that is a holy holiday in Boston. The schools are closed. There's a big parade in South Boston, and every cop, whether Boston police or state police, is on duty that day because they're making sure the kids are not getting too drunk, and they're paying attention to the parade that's marching up and down Broadway Street in South Boston. Well, I think the thieves who planned this theft had this night. This was around 1:00 in the morning. There were two men dressed in police uniforms in what is thought to have been a smaller car, with a rear window that opened up, and the car that was seen on that street at 1 a.m., 12:30, 1 a.m. Who had seen it as a couple of kids who had left a party late, and they were walking on Palace Road, which is the side street that the museum sides on, and they saw these two guys dressed in police uniforms, including their hats, and they were sitting in a car about 100 feet away from the side door of the museum. Well, the kids were drunk, so they didn't try to inquire about why two cops would be in a plainclothes car, not a Crown Vic as the detectives were in, and not a cruiser. So they walked away, and at 1:10 in the morning, the car inched up closer to the side door of the museum, and the two men got out, still dressed in their uniforms, and they rang the side doorbell of the museum. The bell at the side door of the museum. It was the employee's entrance. And again, Rick, the rock and roller, who had worked there for about a year at the time, he had a closed circuit TV at the desk that he could see the two men in police uniforms. And he asked, hello, what is it? What can I do for you? And one of them said, we're here to investigate a disturbance. And they said, and he said to them, there's nothing going on. Everything is fine here. And they said, let us in. We're here to investigate a disturbance. Now, Rick, in his mind is working fast now. I interviewed him many times on this. And he said all he could think of is that some kids had jumped over a back fence that opened up into the museum's nursery, where the shrubs and plants of the museum were stored. That some kids had jumped over that back fence, and someone had seen them and called the police. He had no idea they weren't what they said they were, which were men in police uniforms. So he buzzed them in. He had to buzz them in through two doors, and they came in to his security room, which is right out there in the open, which is a failing of the museum, that they had an open security desk. And they presented themselves to him and they said, is there anybody else here? And he said, yes, there's one other security guard. He's doing the rounds. Call him down. And he calls him down, and then they look at him and they say to him, and Rick is telling me he wondered about them because they both had mustaches. They kept on pressing their mustaches. He now thinks that they were fake mustaches. But he still did not believe that they were anything but what they said, which were police officers. And then they said to him, he made two grievous errors this night. One is to let them in, because he was told, his handbook said to them, if anybody comes to the side door, no matter who it is, police, fire, no matter who it is, you call the police and you summon the police to the door. Don't let anybody in. Well, he had now let them in, and here they were in front of him saying, and they say to him, Rick, you look familiar. Do we have a warrant out for you? And Rick knew he had never been in any scrapes in Boston, so there would be no warrants on him. But he was somewhat suspicious that they were looking at him suspiciously. And he says, no, I'm clean. I've got nothing against, no warrants on me. And they said to him, step away from the desk. Come out here from behind that desk and let's get a good look at you. Now, Rick has a decision to make, because Rick in front of him has the only alarm, it's an emergency alarm, that is inside the museum that he can press, that can tell the outside world. It's a private detective agency that the museum had at its ready, that he could, if he had pressed that button, it would told that private detective company, there's an emergency going on at the museum, summon police now. But he didn't. Why? I said to him, Rick, why did you step away? Why did you follow what they were saying? Why did you follow and tell them to go outside where they were on the outside of the security desk? Why did you remove yourself from hitting that alarm? And he said, well, I'll tell you the truth. And he points to his pocket. I had a ticket that night to the Grateful Dead concert in Hartford, Connecticut. This is Sunday night, March 18th, 1990. You can look it up. There are reviews on the music. Grateful Dead was playing March 18th and March 19th. And Rick had 1990, Sunday night and Monday night in Hartford. And Rick had tickets to the Sunday night concert. And Rick knew enough about the law that he knew. He said, I knew if these guys didn't believe me, if they kept believing with their mistaken belief that I was wanted for something, they were going to lock me up. And I would not have gotten out of jail until Monday morning. And I would have missed the Sunday night concert I had a ticket to. So I said, okay. And they said, at this point, I still believe that they were thieves. Police. So I stepped away. And the minute he stepped away, the second guard came into the room. But the minute he stepped away, they pushed him up against the wall, put handcuffs on him without frisking him. He said the first time he knew they weren't cops is when they didn't frisk him. They put handcuffs on him. The second guard came into the room. They did the same thing to him, and they brought them downstairs. The museum has a basement, and they put them in two separate places inside the museum, a basement. And this is around 1:20, and they spend all about 81 minutes inside. They have an hour. They spend another hour inside the museum doing whatever they want to do. Most art thefts are grab and run. Bad guys go in, grab whatever's on the closest that they want to take, and run out before the alarm starts. But these guys had a whole hour, and they could have done whatever. They could have stayed in there for 5 hours. The next shift was not going to change until 6:30 in the morning. But they only spent another hour inside the museum, but they wreaked havoc. They stole 13 pieces in all, including 2 large Rembrandts, a smaller Rembrandt, in one Vermeer, a Degas, and a Monet, a Manet, that was stolen from a room that was that no one could figure out how they got into that room. But there are 13 pieces in all. In the total value, if you could buy these on the open market now, is more than $1 billion in art was stolen that night. And the artwork, as I say, is of the ages. That it's not known of beyond Boston. It's not is held is not is you know is not thought of as a major crime outside of Boston is a sin. Is because this is artwork of the ages, Rembrandts and Vermeers. The only time Rembrandt painted the sea, the ocean, that's in a painting they're called Christ in a Storm of the Sea of Galilee. It shows Christ in a, you can look it up or you can, it's shown in my book here. You can look it up and it's a stunning painting. Rembrandt didn't need to paint the sea again because it's so gripping of a painting. So it's 32 years later, the art, the beauty of the art is remarkable. The mystery behind this theft is even more remarkable. In 32 years, not a person has been arrested, either a planner, a holder, a robber. No one has been arrested. Not a single piece has been recovered. All 13 pieces, some of the smaller pieces, there were 4 or 5 Degas sketches that were taken. There was a finial, which is the top of a flagpole, that was taken. There is a little called a vase, a beaker, that was taken. Some of the art that was taken, it's again, this museum contained artwork of the ages. It contained what is thought of as the most important piece of art in America on the 3rd floor. They didn't even go up to the 3rd floor. The bad guys stayed within the 1st and 2nd floors of the museum. And we even know where they were inside the museum. One piece of equipment, security equipment, that the museum had put in place a few months before the theft was a motion detector piece of equipment, and it monitored through monitors that are placed in the entries of each gallery. It monitored where the bad guys were inside the museum. So you see, in that transcript, it was able to be. They tried to steal the transcript that was printed out at the security desk. The bad guys, as they left, 81 minutes after the theft, they ripped off the transcript as they ripped off a videotape of them going through the museum. They ripped that off, but the transcript, that piece of equipment, had a computer chip in it. So the FBI, which took over the case, was able to replay where they were. And it shows the bad guys spent all of their time inside the museum in the 2 rooms on the 2nd floor. The Dutch room was where they stole the larger, the more important pieces, and what is called the short gallery, which is just a room away. And they stole the 5 Degas prints, but they also spent a lot of time in that room trying to get a Napoleonic banner, which hung in a frame above the ground. They hoisted themselves on a little chest of drawers. They tried to get the banner out open the frame to get the banner. They couldn't when they came down, but the banner was held by a flagpole and they took the top of that flagpole, which is called the finial. It's a golden eagle. You see them on some flagpoles, but they took that. When they got off of that chest of drawers, they came face to face with a Degas, with a frame that had 5 Degas prints. They busted the frame and they took the prints. Why did they do that? It's not the most important thing about those Degas prints is that they were taken. Nothing else. There are finished products of those prints, but why they showed horse racing scenes, and I'm thinking that appealed to them. So the FBI took over the case in Boston, and they have worked the case diligently. And for the last 10, 15 years, the FBI has put out this advisory that if you have access to the paintings, bring them in. If you have access to any of the artwork, bring them in. No questions asked. You won't be asked to how you got them. You won't be asked any questions. And we'll drive you over to the museum, and there's a $10 million reward waiting. $10 million reward and no questions asked. Yet still, the FBI says they still haven't had, except for a piece of information that I and a couple of other people provided to them about a year ago that they felt was interesting. The FBI says they haven't had what they would call a proof of life sighting of any of the 13 pieces that were stolen. So I've thought about this. I've thought about two things that I've spent time as an investigative reporter. First, who would do it? Who would break into a museum using such wiles, yet in stealing it cause such havoc? Which I don't underuse that word, havoc. Every frame was broken. The glass that was on the front of the frames, that was broken. The two Rembrandts, the two large 6-foot high Rembrandts, including the Storm of the Sea of Galilee, they were cut out of their stretchers. Cut. You could see the shreds left on the sides of the easels. Excuse me, of the frames. If there comes to mind, well, who would order this? There's always a thought of a Mr. Big. If you've seen the Thomas Crown Affair 2, Pierce Brosnan steals a painting that he cannot live without. Well, was there some Mr. Big art thief who could not live without these paintings? That's a possibility. Is there a criminal who has money and through the drug world or the gun, weapons industry cannot live without this Rembrandt and would have ordered up a crime like this, a theft like this? It's possible. But you would not have allowed them to treat the artwork the way they did, with such, like I said, havoc. So as I did my reporting, I came upon, I talked to some people who had been involved with art thefts before here in Boston. And I came upon one guy named Miles Connor, a local. He too was a rock and roller. And he too knew about the Gardner Museum. In fact, he said before he was locked up in the late 80s, he had cased the museum with another guy, and he and this other guy had planned other museum thefts. And this other guy, as it turned out, was a member of the Boston underworld. He was pretty high up in one of the two gangs in the late 80s that were fighting for control of the Boston underworld. And this is how the Gardner theft story melds into the Boston crime story. Because as Connor told me, the only unless you have a fence who can fence the art that you've stolen available to you, the only reason to steal art like this is to get someone out of jail. Because the FBI, the landed gentry, civilized society will be so shocked by a theft of this nature, of this size, dimension, that the FBI will try to do a deal with you, will reach out to you and engage you and do a deal with you and say, what do you want? What do we have to do to get your artwork back? And lo and behold, there was a guy who had been locked up in Boston by the FBI, by the feds, in late '89, named Vincent Ferrara. And Vincent Ferrara was a member of an organized crime gang looking to take control of Boston's crime world in the late '80s. And his driver and one of his closer friends was a guy named Bobby Donati, Donati. And Bobby Donati was this fellow who hung around with Miles Connor and had gotten interested in art theft. And Miles sold him on the belief that if you are able to get your hands on treasured art, the FBI will do business with you. And that's what I came to learn. I talked to someone who was very close to Ferrara, who was locked up in jail in the late '89. And Ferrara, this person, gave me a long interview, week-long interview, and he said to me that Donati had gone to Ferrara on several occasions when Ferrara was in jail and said to him that he was going to pull off this theft and get this artwork and try to engage the FBI to let Ferrara out of jail. Ferrara's, the intermediary on behalf of Ferrara, whom I interviewed, Ferrara said, don't get me involved. I don't want to have anything to do with you in getting involved with this theft. But it's the belief, in fact, the person who knows this case better than anyone, even better than the FBI, is the head of security for the museum, Anthony Amori. And Amori wrote a letter to another prisoner whom I was in contact with about 3 or 4 years ago. And Amori says in the letter that without a doubt, he believes that Bobby Donati was responsible for the theft. And Bobby Donati had possession of the artwork after the theft. Did Bobby Donati reach out to the FBI? I don't know that. What happened to Bobby Donati is I think Bobby Donati tried to, when he wasn't able to, because Ferrara didn't want it to be bartered for his release, I think what happened was Donati went to the underworld to try to fence the material. And that was not a good choice for him. He was brutally killed in mid '91, about a year and a half after the theft. And whom did he reach out to during that 18 months? I don't know. I do know one person he did. And that was a fellow whom I interviewed last year. He was a jeweler who worked in Boston, and he knew Donati. And he gave me a long interview, and I presented him with a couple of other guys. I presented him to the FBI and Anthony Amori, the head of security of the FBI, of the museum. And I said to him, this guy sat down with Donati. Donati came and talked to him, and he brought in one of the pieces that had been stolen out of the museum. It was the finial. It was the top of the flagpole. And why did not Donati bring it into this guy, this jeweler, and to see if he could fence it? And the jeweler's on the record said to me, and if you can look up the Globe story in the clips back in 2021, November 2021. Just look up Gardner Museum, Robert Donati, and Finial, Finial. And you'll see the name of the jeweler and what he told the FBI. We also gave them a property in a suburb of Boston that Donati's sister and ex-wife had been living in around the time before his death. And it was my sense that maybe Donati had dropped off material at that house. And the FBI appreciated that information. They searched the house diligently, but they didn't find anything. But that's where the mystery remains. I think from the family of Bobby Donati, they run hot and cold as to whether or not he could have been responsible for this theft. It did take some artifice. It did take some wiles, and Bobby was. They didn't think Bobby had the smarts to do it, but others who know Bobby, and particularly Miles Connors, said he did, and could have pulled this off. What's the secret? I think the secret goes through who killed Bobby Donati. I think the family of Donati's family, his sisters, his son, have been asked many times to help. They want to know who killed their brother. And I think if they were taken into confidence by the FBI, that information might hold the key to them, to get them to cooperate. And I've also thought about a social media campaign about this case, which, continue to work on it, lo these many years. Why? Well, art is important to us. It's important to Boston. Boston considers itself a world-class city. We're no longer ruled by the law of the street. We're no longer ruled by omerta. Matt, you can tell your audience what omerta is, but it's no longer.
They know.
They know. It's no longer the operating code of principle here in Boston. We survived the marathon bombing in 2013. 5 people were killed, a security guard and police officer, and just people who were at the marathon were killed. But so many lives were saved after that because of the valiant effort of the first responders and the people in the emergency rooms. And Boston has grown so much as a city than what was the operating principle of omerta in 1990. And what the museum should do and what the FBI should do is put up the museum allows the empty frames on the second floor where those paintings, majestic paintings, had once hung, are the empty frames. And I would put in front of those empty frames not the FBI and not even the museum directors. They have, they've suffered valiantly, the loss tragically, but I would put in front of those frames people who have street cred, not bad guys, not that, but let's take the Cardinal O'Malley has tremendous credibility in both the have world and the have not world here in Boston. And I would have him stand in front of those empty frames, and I would have him retell the story of why Mrs. Gardner hung those paintings on the inside these galleries. It was for us. It was to make us more conscious, more aware, to elevate our artistic sense. She did it for us. And it's no reason that these paintings remain hidden. And they were stolen to get someone out of jail, and that never happened. And that effort failed, and they were stashed away. Does someone know exactly where they are? I don't think so. I think if they did those, they wouldn't take advantage of the FBI offer of bring it forward, get in with a good lawyer, you get your bring in whatever the paintings look like now. They may be frayed. They may have sign of the ages, worn from the ages that have passed by, but there still could be recovery can be done. Artistic work can be done on them, and with that, we could get those paintings could return onto the gallery walls, and we would fulfill the pledge that she gave to Boston to make Boston. She brought art to Boston, and she did it for us. She did it for the upper class, and she did it for the have-nots. And so get them back to Boston. This is important artwork. Yes, Netflix did a terrific job last year, 4 hours worth of the mystery, but they didn't come to a conclusion. And the conclusion, though, rests within Boston, within some of the neighborhoods of Boston. Even if you don't know, you have some pieces of information that could be valuable to the FBI, the museum, or if you don't, go to a lawyer. A lawyer will represent you well, and he will represent you and bring that information to the authorities. You'll be better off. The museum will be better off. All of Boston will be better off. So that's the story that I've worked on for several years now, and I still consider it Boston's last best secret. We remain like I say, there's only two things that keep Boston from being a world-class city. One of them is getting Boston another World Series championship, but also is getting our paintings back into the Gardner Museum, and it's a challenge that'll stay in front of us until the paintings are returned. The summer that I was working on writing my book, Master Thieves, was the summer of 2014, and it was the summer of the Ice Bucket Challenge. If you're too young, you might look it up. What your older brothers and sisters, if not your parents, did was they dumped buckets of ice over their heads, and then challenged, and did so on Facebook, and then challenged 2 or 3 of their friends to do likewise, as well as contribute to the research to fight ALS, the Lou Gehrig's disease, for medical research to find a cure for ALS. That summer, in July and August of that summer, that Ice Bucket Challenge was promulgating out there, they raised $80 million for ALS research. The previous summer, $2 million. So social media can be a big catalyst in drawing people's attention. And I think something like that could be done here to get arouse Boston, people who know something, to arouse them with a presentation by the Cardinal or people of that stature, and have them challenge Boston that we await to become a world-class city. And we could solve this by us, the citizenry of Boston. Forget the FBI, forget the museum, forget the haves. This is our city, the city of the haves and the have-nots. We showed that in the response to the Ice Bucket Challenge, to the response to the marathon bombing. That it's our responsibility calling on the conscience of Boston to return these paintings. And so the mystery needs to be solved. If the story doesn't get told, so be it. I think the story, I've told the story as well as I can in the Boston Globe, in my book, Master Thieves. But the full story as to where they've been hidden all these years, so be it. Avail yourself of the $10 million reward that the museum has put out there, and the pledge that the FBI has made that no one gets prosecuted if you tell them what you know, and you, if not, show them where the paintings are hidden. So that's my presentation, Matt. Thank you very much for having me on.
What about Bobby? I interviewed him, the mobster guy, kind of the ex-mobster guy.
Bobby Luisi?
Luisi, thank you.
Yeah.
What about the guy that spoke with him that said he knew they were buried under a slab in Florida or something? I mean,
so Bobby Luisi had been a mobster, had been a construction guy, gotten involved in a cocaine ring here in Boston in the late 90s. Had two men working for him. One, a guy named Bobby Guarenti. And Bobby Guarenti had, been a low-level mobster here in Boston. Got prosecuted, went to jail for 20 years for multiple bank robberies. Got out in the early 90s and went on to ne'er-do-well works and other criminal activity. And one of the activities, he bonded with Bobby Luisi, whom you interviewed. And they had a drug trafficking operation outside of Boston. And when they were at this house that they were holed up at in the late 90s, 98, a story about the Gardner Museum, another, is there a big break to happen, came on TV. And Bobby Guarenti said to Luisi, hey, do you know where I could fence stolen artwork? And Luisi said, no, I don't know anything about artwork. That's not my gig. Why? And he said, well, I may have some artwork hidden underneath a concrete slab underneath a house in Florida. So he told that to Luisi in 98. Luisi gets prosecuted for other crimes. He gets locked up in the early 00s, and he tells the feds in the early 00s what he's been told. And they go checking one door, check another. They find out Guarenti is dead. And so they don't really follow up right then, but they go back to Guarenti, they go back to Luisi, and Luisi says, that's all he told me. Well, around the same time, Guarenti's widow, about 2010, calls the FBI and says, I think my husband may have had access to those paintings.
Separately?
And he did. 2010. So, I'm still doing my reporting for the Globe on it. This never makes the light of day then. Oh, really? What did he do with them? He gave them to his best friend, Bobby Gentile. Who's Bobby Gentile? He's a mobster, low-level mobster, lives in Hartford, outside of Hartford. Well, they go knock on Bobby Gentile's door, 2010. Bobby Gentile, I'll weave in Luisi's story into this. They knock on Gentile's story in 2010, and Gentile says to them, oh, yeah, I'm interested in that case. And yeah, but Guarenti never gave me any of those paintings. He and I were very interested in that case because of the then $5 million reward. We think, we knew some of these guys, bad guys. We thought maybe we could find the paintings. We could get $5 million reward from you guys. And the Fed said, we don't believe you. We'll give you a lie. I said, I'll take a lie detector test. Every time they gave him a lie detector test, he flunked it. So what they did is they sent in an undercover agent to Bobby's house, Gentile's house in Hartford. And the guy says to him, do you have any guns? I'd like to get some guns. Gentile says to him, no. I don't deal in any guns, nothing. And then he sees some Percocets on the counter there in Gentile's house. Can I take these? He says, yeah, I use them for my back. Well, they prosecuted Gentile for giving the Percocets. So they take Bobby, they get Bobby out of the house, and they get a search warrant for the house. And they search the house, Gentile's house, and they go through it. It's like a 2-day search. And they don't find anything except down in the basement, they find a piece of paper, like a piece of paper like this.
Right.
And on it is a list of all the stolen pieces, the 13 stolen pieces, and what they would have gotten out of the black market. So now they know a little bit more about Gentile, and they say to him, where did you get this? He says, I didn't write that. It's written in French. How would I read it? Somebody that we and Garenti and I went to said, and who knew art theft, he wrote that for us. Well, they stayed interested in Gentile. He got out of jail in 2014, and I went and visited him in his house. He let me come and visit him. I interviewed him for 5 hours. He denied ever having access to any of the paintings, but at the end of it, he said to me, I've given you a lot of material here, and it is in my book. And he says, what do I get out of this? So I'm thinking to myself, this is in January, February 2014. Why is Bobby Gentile looking? He knows his lawyer had let me come talk to him. He knows I can't give him any money. Reporters can't pay for interviews.
Right.
So I said to him, Bobby, I can't give you any money, but how about you and I do this? You have sworn on a stack of Bibles and on a lie detector test that you didn't have access. You never saw any of the paintings. Let's say you're lying. Let's say you could tell me another story. How about this? I'll use you as a source. I'm a lawyer and I am a reporter. I'll source what you tell me. But I need to know no more bullshit. I need to know, where did you get the paintings from? What paintings did you get? Where did you store them? What happened to them? Why are you saying that, even on your deathbed, this is 2014, on his deathbed in 2012, in jail, he said, I don't know. There are no paintings. I've never had any paintings. I said, why don't you tell me the truth? And I will split whatever this book that I write with you. I'll split the proceeds with you. I'm thinking to myself, what am I, giving him this line? This is a line of BS. Reporters don't work this way. Reporters don't set out a scheme like this. Tell me what you know, and I'll put it into the book. But instead of saying, no, I don't know anything, I've denied it, and that's the truth, he puts his head down. And for 10 seconds, he keeps his head down. And I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, he's going to tell me the secret of the ages. And he puts his head up and he looks me right with those dark eyes, those black eyes. Nope, I told you the truth. I know nothing. I don't know. I never had it, never had anything. So I said, I gave him a hug. Thank you for all the information you've given to me, and it's all in my book. And I go out to my car and I call his lawyer, the first thing, Ryan McGuigan, terrific lawyer in Hartford, Connecticut. I said, Ryan, Terrific interview. Last 3 days, I've been talking to him for 5 hours, but I think he's lying through his eye teeth. Everything he's telling me, all these denials are lies. And Ryan says, "What are you talking about, lying? What lies? What does he say?" I said, "Well, I've got it all on tape. But at the last point, he told me to shut off the tape recorder, and he offers me this deal. What does he get out of this?" And when I say we could write a book together, he won't do it. But he said, "So you thought that if you split the proceeds of the book, that he might go for it and tell you a different story?" And I said, "Yeah, that's what he was. What else was he thinking about? This option I gave him." He said, "No, this is what he was thinking about, Steve. He was thinking about, I'm going to con this stupid reporter. And I'm going to say to him, give me $10,000, come back next week, and we'll start working on the book." But he knows a reporter, you don't have $10,000. So he didn't give you that option. But he's a con artist, Steve. He doesn't have any access to the paintings. So there was one more secret that I asked him about, and that was in the shed than in his backyard. I had been told that there was a shed in the backyard of Bobby's house, and he gave me the keys to the shed. I opened up the lock, opened up the shed door, like every shed we have, except there's a false floor. It's not the shed's floor, it's another flooring. Why is there more other flooring? Is it was a false shed floor.
Right.
Bobby had taken the real shed's flooring out and dug ditches. There were absolute ditches underneath the floors. And in those ditches, he would put rubber bins. And the FBI believes that Bobby had the paintings in those bins beneath the false floor. But what had happened, there had been a flood in the shed, inside the shed in Bobby's backyard, and that the flooding had got under the flooring into the Rubbermaid bins, and whatever were there had been ruined. So I said this to Bobby. I said, "That's what happened. They were ruined in the bins." And he said, No, I know that's what the FBI says, but it's not. It was motors. I had some stolen motors. Who knows? But the secret ends with Bobby. And Bobby died last year this time, 2021. And I had interviewed him about April of last year, of 2021. And I said to him, I said, "Bobby, the reason why you don't want to tell the truth is because you did have the paintings. And they did get ruined in the bins. But you just don't want to be remembered." He's an older man now. You don't want to be remembered this way as the man who blew the artwork of the ages. And he said, "It's a good theory, but it's not true. I never had the artwork." But that's where the FBI believes, and that's where the museum believes that the artwork ended up, is in Bobby Gentile's false shed, not underneath the shed. Both Gentile and Guarenti were working. So I was doing a podcast with WBUR and the Globe, and a podcast called Last Scene, 10 episodes about this case. And the last episode, the 10th episode, has about a dig that we did on a property that Guarenti had access to in Florida, outside of Orlando. And we did it in 2019, summer 2019. And we thought we had found, it was an empty lot now. We had gotten some, what do they call the kind of surveying work done on the lot, and the surveyor said there is something beneath this ground that is an anomaly, and we gave the report to the FBI, and the FBI thought it was significant enough that they commissioned a search, the derrick, to go in and to dig it up, but nothing was found. So like I said, we've tried every option of investigative reporting and investigative work can bring. So there has to be another approach to unlock this secret, and that's why I call on Boston to use in Boston, the conscience of Boston, to get this artwork back. And there is a transcendent reason, and that's because we get a recovery of the greatest art theft in world history, and we get paintings back that Mrs. Gardner wanted on the walls, on her museum's walls, for all of us to appreciate.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Matt.
Yeah, I appreciate that, you got, that it so well, and you can, articulate the entire story so concisely. I mean, it's great to just sit here and listen to you.
Well, it has a lot of dead ends, and it has a lot of missed opportunities. But when you think of all you have to do is Google Gardner Museum art theft, and the museum itself has a page to the theft on its webpage, that will go through all the detail, and you'll see images of what was stolen, and you'll see why. If this is the artwork of the ages, and why, at least, this material does belong back on the walls of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum.
Well, it really all has to be together. Had they been broken apart and sold, which is possible.
Yeah, right.
Whenever I talk to people, they're like, "Oh, they were probably sold." Well, it would have to be some filthy rich Japanese person, right, or an oligarchy, or someone who's willing to put them all up, and all of them weren't valuable, right? There were some of the things.
Only 4 or 5 of them are stratospheric in value. But if you look at the like I said, the museum's webpage on the works, 2 Rembrandts, you wouldn't have broken them out of their frames and cut them out of the frames as they did.
No, that's amateur.
They did terrible damage to them. Right. But they can be, and the museum is willing to pay $10 million to get them back. They can be restored. And for any lessening of value to the paintings themselves comes back the recovery, and the recovery was caused by Boston's conscience and generosity, and that remains to be seen. I challenge you, Boston. Do it for your grandkids. Do it for my grandkids.
I appreciate you watching, and I bet you've never seen me that quiet on an episode or for an interview. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I've watched a couple of documentaries. I remember studying this in college. I've watched 2 documentaries. One of them is a multi-part series on Netflix about the Gardner Museum. I read a book that was written by the FBI agent that investigated the Gardner heist. Really, honestly, it's something that comes up over and over again. And you probably even if you've ever watched Sneaky Pete, that series, one of the episodes, or a couple, I think it's 1 or 2 of the episodes is based on the recovering of of one of the paintings that was stolen in the Gardner Museum. Super interesting. You should check out the Netflix documentary series. And I appreciate you guys watching. Do me a favor, share the video, subscribe, hit the bell, leave me a comment, and I appreciate it. And I will see you around.